Hi there and welcome to today's podcast. Today we're going to have Dr. Kelly Friesen, who's a minister, theologian, and coach, and we're going to talk about neurodiversity. So what exactly is that? Well, here's a question for you. Do you ever feel like you don't fit in? Or maybe you communicate differently than others, you find yourself in a group and you're like, why is everyone staring at me? That totally happens to me. Maybe you've been called too sensitive in your lifetime. Maybe you feel like you're a total weirdo. Whatever it is, maybe you're neurodivergent and you just need to understand yourself a little better. So what is neurodiversity and what does it mean to be neurodivergent? Well, we're going to talk to Kelly about that in today's podcast. We'll cover topics like autism, ADHD, highly sensitive people, and other explanations of neurodivergent people. We're also going to talk about what a neurotypical person is so that we can understand this all a little bit better. Dr. Kelly is truly passionate about celebrating every kind of person that God created. If you're one of these things, neurodivergent, neurotypical, you're ADHD, or you fit into society's norm, God has created us all on purpose for a purpose. And so we're going to talk about how we can work together to kind of alleviate an injustice that's been happening in the world. How do we remove stigmas that separate us? We're going to talk about that. In fact, Kelly has very prayerfully been searching for a solution for that. So we're going to talk about that. And if you believe you fall into the neurodivergent category, Dr. Kelly has 5 practical steps to get unstuck. And really it's for everybody, but it's really, really great. So make sure you stick around for that. Kelly, welcome to the podcast. It's Dr. Kelly Friesen, which I'm still getting used to, and I'm so proud of you because you and I have known each other for such a long time.
Grade 4.
Yeah. And not only were you a friend in elementary school, but you have been a friend through many trials that I have gone through in my life. And not only a friend, but as you began to move through your life, you became a pastor and a coach, and now you're a doctor and a theologian. And I have to say that it was through some critical times in my life that you were there for me when I made some really bad mistakes and no one loved me. You were there to love me through it. And
you were easy to love.
Oh, thank you. Not everyone would say that. But I think because of the tremendous love that you have inside of you, maybe it was easier for you. But as we go on in life, and here we are, and you have a real passion for, I guess the passion that I see in you is to love and understand neurodivergence. And when you first presented this huge word to me, I was like, what is that? And what is Kel doing? Like, what is Kelly up to? But the more I learn about it, the more I realize the importance of it. The more I learn from you, the more I realize that I am likely neurodivergent. Well, I am. But
sometimes it takes a bit to come to grips with what that means.
yeah. And I think that first and foremost, because we're going to talk about this a lot today, I think what people need to understand probably is what a neurodivergent is. So for me, I've realized through counseling in the last couple of years that one day my counselor was like, do you know what an HSP is? And I was like, no. And it is a highly sensitive person, which is, okay, so you're sensitive. No, it's actually a scientific or a medical condition that I'm learning that doctors are starting to put a label on. It's not just being a sensitive person. It's like internally, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like sensory, not just sensitivity. And it's a part of your nervous system as well. It's so
anyway, I could blabber about that forever, but you've studied neurodivergence and neurodivergent people, neurotypical people. But I think what we could start with is, what exactly is that? You know, those words that we're using to describe someone, like, I'm just going to use myself as an example. You know, sometimes I don't fit in all the time, and sometimes I think completely differently than all the people around me, and I have a very hard time focusing and keeping a thought. You know, if you're talking about something, I am 5 steps ahead in my brain, and then I start talking about something completely different, because that's how my brain works. But that's just my thing. But there are a lot of different things where a neurodivergent person doesn't necessarily think like a neurotypical person. Okay, that was a lot of talking on my part.
It's great.
So let's just start with, what is neurodivergence and what is a neurotypical,
Right.
and what is the difference? What is that?
Yeah. Maybe some background is good too in this. So with my history of ministry, and so both professionally and personally, I've been bridging the gap between neurodivergent and neurotypical people for like 50 plus years. So that's a bit telling of my age, but that's okay. And I say this in light of the fact that those terms were not, 50 years ago, were not popular.
Right.
You know, we didn't know what those were, but nonetheless, that's been going on for a long, long time. So I've been ministering to both neurotypical and neurodivergent people for many, many years. And I would say probably almost equally across the board as far as the amount of people. Obviously, the percentage of neurodivergent people is less in the world than neurotypical, so you know, we take that into consideration too. But so neurodiversity is kind of the topic of what my graduate research studies were on, neurodiversity and the church's response. And neurodiversity is both neurotypical and neurodivergent, and the idea is that both, in fact, all people, so people either fit into neurotypical or neurodivergent, and neurodiversity is the equality of all the people, right? So it's the treating equally, having the understanding that both groups of people have equal value and should be celebrated, right?
Right.
Accommodated equally. Now, I use that word accommodated, it can sound negative, but if we look at it in a good light, a term of just being allowed to live and exist and be and being celebrated and all of those things, right? That's everyone's right? We all should have that same celebration, right?
Yeah.
But neurotypical, we'll start with that, because that's the majority of people. So majority of people are neurotypical. They would be the people that would have, like, they would be told to have the brain processing, or the processing that is the majority.
Okay.
So some people would use some terms that aren't great. So they might say the normal people are neurotypical. We don't want to use that term because we're all, right? It really does stigmatize those that are not normal, right? When we start using terms like that. And part of the neurodiversity movement is to remove these stigmas, remove these terms that would separate people.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what I'm passionate about, because we don't want to separate people. We're all made in the image of God. We're all here to be celebrated. We all are uniquely gifted. We all have unique purpose.
God made us the way we are on purpose.
Yes.
No matter who we are.
Absolutely.
You know?
Right.
would it be fair to say that when you and I were growing up, I know things are changing now, but in schools, back in the day, the schooling system taught neurotypical people?
Well, majority, I would say, yeah. I mean, you might have had the odd teacher that had different ways just because maybe their brain processed differently, so they might have had different means for different ways and methods for teaching. So if you were a neurodivergent person and you weren't maybe learning in the typical way, you probably would have flourished with that teacher more than maybe ones that, you know, you were not typically going to learn that way.
Right.
The thing with neurodivergent, and the reason that I like the term neurodivergent, is because it does remove the stigmas. There's so many, it's an umbrella term for so many things. So HSP, like you mentioned, is one of them. It can be autism, it can be ADHD, it can be dyslexia. You know, there's so many, and some of these that fall under the umbrella of neurodivergent would be diagnosed, other things not. So, for example, HSP isn't a diagnosis as far as the DSM goes, but it is still beginning to be recognized, like a lot of these, like misophonia or different things. You know, they're all. So a lot of people, when I started talking more about neurodiversity, and when I did my research, I had phenomenal amount of neurodivergent people express their gratitude that I was digging into this. Yeah. You know,
I'm grateful.
And so many people were coming to me and saying, you know, I'm recognizing myself in that testimony that person gave, and so there's a lot of people who might be able to connect with some of the neurodivergent traits. They may not feel that they're neurodivergent. Some might, you know, and so there's a lot coming to the surface right now. People are starting to be more okay, I guess, to see themselves in a different light, which is really good. I know the generation that we grew up in, these things were not talked about. And anything different, you just stayed away from. Right? Anything different, you tried not to be different. You tried to mask and just to stay like in this like norm so that you wouldn't be looked at and picked on and all these things. That people are starting to understand that these are good things. These are to be celebrated. That's a good thing.
Well, I know that I have you know, I've embraced my differences most recently, and there's so much freedom in that, because I did try to spend the majority of my life trying to be what society wanted me to be, and this past year I'm like, you know what, I'm never gonna be that. That's not who I am. Whoa, freedom.
But these are my strengths right here, right?
I am an extremely sensitive person, and I'm also realizing my empathy is through the roof, and that's a great thing. And I'm also you know, I'm fiercely passionate to fight for justice.
And you're very creative.
I am creative, which I think you've mentioned is a commonality for many neurodivergent people.
It can be, for sure.
And I just, you know, I just say these things about myself in hopes that someone can relate, and knowing that it is 100% okay to not be like everyone else, you know, to be a little, well, I was gonna say odd, but it's not. That's what we're trying to get away from, right? Yeah. So it is to be celebrated. And so, and you have a passion for that, and I'm very grateful. I'm really grateful for the research that you've been doing on it.
You know, it keeps changing, right? Like the first time the term neurodiversity even was coined, that has evolved even since then to embrace all neurodivergent people. In the beginning, it was mostly pushed through the autistic movement, or the I'm at a loss for words as to the there was autistic people that used that word, and so primarily it was interesting because when I first started talking about this topic and the research I was doing, a lot of people thought that I was only talking about autistic people, but I wasn't. Neurodiversity has evolved to include all neurodivergent people, and I do want to say that you know, as much research as I've done, I'm still learning.
Yeah.
You know, and really the landscape keeps changing.
Yeah.
And the terms that people prefer keep changing.
Right.
And I think we need to be really sensitive to people with that, because some people are going to be using old terms
right.
that others might find offensive.
Right.
But we need to be really gracious and go, okay, you know what? This is why that person finds it offensive.
Right.
Right. That person may still want to use it. That's their prerogative. It's okay. Right. And I think too many times we just want to blast our opinion. Right.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest things is the term Asperger's. That has now in more recent years come to light that the doctor who this Asperger's was named after, his last name was Asperger's, was like a Nazi. And so a lot of people are like, I'm not using that term. And since then, it's been removed from the DSM. And then DSM-5, it's not in there.
Okay.
It's all autism now.
Okay.
So, right? And so I think that we have to be really, there are people who are really passionate about not using that term for that reason, because a lot of the autistic children were sent to concentration camps, death camps. Right. And so they are very passionate about, rightly so, passionate about not using that term anymore, and very proud to say they're autistic, rather. So I think we need to be really sensitive to that, and also the people that are saying, no, I like that term still, and I want to recognize that that's who I am. That was my original diagnosis, and that's what I want to call it. Right? And not to blast them. But we do need to be really sensitive with that.
Right. I recall in a conversation we had earlier that you mentioned, you know, the different kinds of neurodivergent people, and you also mentioned that there's many different kinds. Like it's when you're ADHD, you're not like, not every single person with ADHD has the same traits, or when you're an HSP, you could be highly sensitive in this area or this area. It doesn't look the same.
Yeah.
When you're autistic, there's many different versions and layers to being autistic, you know, and all the different kinds. So I think that you have mentioned before, it's really important to not lump people into one category and think, okay, now this is the solution for all the people in this category.
Absolutely.
you just can't do that.
You can't. And you can't. And there's a saying that says, if you've met one neurodivergent person, you've only met one.
Yeah.
and really it's the case with society, with anyone. We're all uniquely made.
Yeah.
Right? And so we you know, even all these, like, let's say these personality tests out there, you could have one person, what's a popular one?
The Briggs and Myers. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Let's say
or the DISC, that's often used in business.
But let's say one, okay? Let's say you're
ENFP.
There we go.
Although people familiar with Briggs and Myers will know.
You can't say that everyone who is an
ENFP
are the same.
Right.
Every single one is different. Right. And it's the same thing. So it's the same thing with neurodivergent people. And I think that I don't think I'm alone in liking the term neurodivergent, especially because there's so many co-occurring conditions. A lot of neurodivergent people have more than one neurodivergence, right?
Yeah.
And so what it does is it removes the stigmas. So rather than saying you have this and this and this and this, right? Because people can go like, well, you said you're autistic, so you must be like my nephew who's 5 and is this way.
Right.
Well, no, you're actually a 40-year-old woman who, right, like, has completely different traits, right? Like, so you can't put people in that kind of box. So the term neurodivergent removes that instant stigma that goes into the brain and allows you to see the person for who they are.
Yeah.
All their unique qualities, all their quirks, which quirks are great, by the way. I love quirks. That's a positive term when I say it.
If you want to learn more about Dr. Kelly, head to her website, kellyfriesen.ca. There you're going to be able to find the link to the course, Neurodiversity and the Church's Response. It's a certificate training program, and it is available for pre-order, and it's going to be really great for your place of work or your place of worship. If you're a leader in a business or a workplace, this course is going to be amazing to bring people together, to help us understand each other, and to make sure that everyone is feeling included and loved. I've also placed the links below, so it's going to be easy to find. Thanks again, Dr. Kelly. It's always a pleasure, and look forward to part 2 of the podcast. And as promised, we want to take a look at the 5 practical steps to get unstuck with Dr. Kelly Friesen. Now, we're going to do a recap real quick, and then we're going to point you to the full podcast so that you can take these steps into your life and see some real results. So, 5 steps to getting unstuck. Number 1, before you get out of bed, think of 3 things you are thankful for. And the scripture to back that up is Psalm 5, verse 3. Number 2, celebrate the small day-to-day things you usually would not think to celebrate. This is a big deal. This is going to be a mind shift for you. Scripture to back that up, Proverbs 17, verse 22. And all of this scripture is going to be in the notes below. Number 3, the 3rd step to getting unstuck. Give yourself the grace to process all the stuff. Be gracious on yourself. You don't have to be perfect. Psalm 84 verse 11 is the scripture to back that up. Number 4, seek wise counsel. So work together with a coach, a counselor. Maybe you just need a really good and trusted friend. That is what God really encourages you to do, because we are not meant to do this alone. So number 4, seek wise counsel. Scripture to back that up, Proverbs 19, verse 20 to 21. And number 5, as you fall asleep at night, recount all the positives in your day. So just take a look back at your day, and even if you're going through a really hard time in life, to take a look at the few things that you're really thankful for. It could be simply you're thankful for God, or maybe you're thankful for your fluffy pillow. Anything like that. It really helps you in your mindset, and it changes things internally. The scripture to back that up is Psalm 92 verses 1 to 2. Now, again, make sure to head to podcast number 12, and Dr. Kelly Friesen takes an in-depth look as to why all those things work. Remember to subscribe to the Phoebe Project on Spotify and on YouTube. Make sure to head to our Instagram page. You can also go to Facebook and TikTok. You'll find us in all these places. And I hope that together with my friends, we can help you get unstuck. If you'd like to share your story on the podcast about how you got unstuck, how God helped you through a really hard time, what you did to pull yourself out of the mud, what God did to help you, please reach out. We'd be happy to tell your story.